All right. Part of the reason why I'm doing this is that we're front loading how you want students to respond to you. So things like, what platforms are you guys using to present live sessions? Zoom, Blackboard, Adobe Connect, WebEx, Google Hangout. You guys can type those in the chat. So what platforms are you using for your live or video sessions? So one of the things that we're noticing, and I'm going to model, is like I'm in my bedroom right now because I have 3 children under the age of 10 at home. So you can use backgrounds. That's a little distracting. My suggestion is not having the video on during the instructional piece. So like I said hello to you, you can see what I look like, you can see that I'm here, but turning that off, that really helps with connectivity issues with Zoom. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look at the PowerPoint. And if you guys have questions and things, keep pushing them in the chat. Once I'm done presenting each section, just like you would see in a block schedule, I'll answer questions then. So I'll tell you, okay, I'm ready for questions now. I'll still be looking in the chat just in case you need clarification, but that's the way we're gonna go. So I made a PowerPoint and I'm sharing that with you and you all see it. You can see it, give me a Z as in 0 in the chat. That way I can tell that you can see it. Okay, so there's lots of ways doing a block schedule. I'm going to show you mine. You have flexibility in this. So for example, what I'm teaching right now, I'm teaching a 90-minute block and I'm only addressing math and language arts during that time. You could add science, you could have social studies, you could have grammar, you could have a lot of different things. And those are all your choices, but we want to make sure that the time you're spending on each item is meaningful. The time that you're spending is plausible for the kids to do, because we're really dealing with, right? You guys aren't suddenly going from brick and mortar in your classroom to homeschool. We're in crisis education, right? We're doing this because we're in this global pandemic. This is where we're at, and we're all adjusting, including our family. So that's where that flexibility comes in. So my students and I, when we decided my school that I'm teaching at is currently closed, we decided that because everything was changing, we were going to go on an adventure, and we decided to call it adventure instruction. Whatever you have a name for your classroom, or you have teams, or you have a theme, you might want to name that same, you would just put it here. I use the exact same PowerPoint slide every time I instruct to create that consistency, and so that it's a clear path of what they're doing and how they're transitioning. So if I switch on over, the next one is classroom expectations, and I'm going to we're going to go back. Classroom expectations. I made this slide, so I got a cork board and I started adding. Right, I got a cork board that's from an image, and then I just took type boxes and typed all over those. You guys can mirror the language you guys use with your classroom rules. I would just add not putting personal information, not having them use the mic without permission. I would suggest even further, don't let them have that. Like, you guys don't have chat, you don't have microphone capabilities, you don't have video capabilities right now. You guys can manage those things. This is always the way that I'm doing it. Typically, when I teach in Blackboard. We have some of those functioning, like no thumbs down. We have a thumbs up and thumbs down. You have that capability here too. You can use those tools as well for kids to respond to you. It's just much easier when you're with your small group of students rather than doing this with where I've had webinars where there's up to 1,000 people. So that's something to keep in mind. Another way to show it is this. I teach middle school right now, so this is our content. The green check is a clip art piece. I asked them to do that because the platform I use has a function of give me a green check mark. We want for that agreement to adhere to the expectations. And that's what we want. We want the kids to know these are our rules. We're setting them up. It's a way to help manage them to get out of the modality of their lives, right? Because everybody's home. You have family members that are home, their siblings at home, there's lots of distractions. This is a way to bring it around to get them focused on mine. And as you're repeating it, you're going to get that buy-in, and it's helping them transition into that learning space. Any questions on classroom expectations or how to do this, why we have this in place. Let's transition. So I always give an objective/agenda slide because I am doing a block schedule and I'm focused on engagement versus standard-based learning, right? It looks a little bit different. So I can statement. You guys can do this. You can augment it for our kindergartners. You can have it be more dynamic for our 8th graders and anywhere in between. I can discover new concepts and revisit what I know in math and language art. I can apply what I know to the real world. So the kids know this. My students are accustomed to writing that themselves. You might not have done that. This is a way for them to easily understand, like, this is our goal for. I give the agenda, and you want to make sure you're consistent. So whatever blocks you want to put out, or whatever item or setup you want to do, whether it's saying hi is what I have, right? That's their warm-up. Math, language arts, adventure time, and takeaways. That's how I have it structured. A 4-part objective. If this makes sense to you, give me a yes in the chat. By setting this up and making it consistent, you're bringing habits, peace of mind, consistency, accountability, and it just creates a structure. Know that my school is closed, so I'm doing review. I'm filling in gaps where I know my students are struggling. I'm extending it out where what we're learning connects to the real world in meaningful ways that we don't, my students don't always get that practice for. Whatever your parameters, whatever your district's telling you, whatever your students are working on, maybe there's something that you guys are reading that you want to translate into this platform, whatever it is, do it. Just make sure it's consistent, because this can be more specific, it can be more general. So I always do a check-in, because under these unusual, unprecedented circumstances, it's very important to make sure I know how my students are doing. They get this check-in just like this each day. How are you doing? Name the feeling you're having now. What have you been doing since yesterday? What's your plan for today? I'm teaching 7th grade right now. That would work for 7th and 8th graders. That might not work for your kindergarten. You could have, just like we have posters on the wall, you could get the icons of a happy face, a sad face, a tired face, and have them say it out loud, what they are. Happy, sad, whatever, over the mic. There's lots of ways of doing it. It's just to check their, how they're doing, how they're behaving, how this is affecting them. And they get to express themselves, and it doesn't feel so, and they always do it because they want to know, right? How are you doing? We talk to our students like that when we see them. We want to do that here. This can be, you can also, in this check-in, fun activities as warm-ups and things. I always write down how much time they're going to get. These timers a lot. My platform that our school uses has that one embedded. I've also, when I've done these Zoom, have used those free timer apps. So I'll play like the Jeopardy song for the amount of time, and then you get the ring, and then we answer. I give them the command I want them to do. I want my students to answer these 4 questions, and when they're done typing it to me privately, they're going to give me a green check mark. And I'm going to do that every day, and we're going to do it where it's a habit of mine. Whatever check-in, whatever method you want to do, as long as you're consistent about you're checking in about this, and that this question or this activity can change, and then you want them to do that, and that structure should be there. And that's really easy to do. And your students, which fortunately we're in this circumstance, but it's March, right? We just ended March. You guys know your students by now. You know how they behave, you know how they act, you know what they're capable of, what their supports are. You've reached out to the families. So you can augment this to match where they are. And we want it, and this also helps in making sure they're there. You can't necessarily tell if a student is present and engaged. And this is one of the ways of doing it, because you're prompting them to do something. An extension activity could look like this. So for our younger students who have not developed those typing skills, you can open up their ability to use the microphone, and they can all share out, and you say 3, 2, 1, everyone say hi, and they all yell hi. Or you put on a slide of like, what's your favorite ice cream? And you say 1, 2, 3, and then everyone's mic turns on and they say their favorite ice cream flavor. Whatever the case may be, this is fun because they can hear each other. They get pumped up. I mean, who doesn't want to scream? All the children do right now, right? They're cooped up. That's a great way of dealing with that. That's one way of doing a warm-up or a check-in or a piece like that. That's extension out of like their individual check-in. You can also do something like this. Warm up. What's your favorite season? Platform that I use, and Adobe Connect and some of those other ones, you can actually, they can actually type, you can give them tools to type on the whiteboard itself. It could type in room chat. Like, you guys all right now tell me this. What's your favorite season? So you can all type that into room chat right now. So I'll model that, right? Yeah, exactly. And then because all of this is room chat, we all can see each other. You can very quickly figure out, you know, how many students of you should be in the classroom. Of those students who are in the classroom, how many people are responding. And they get to see each other, what each other thinks, just like when you're in the classroom, because all of the other students can read and hear that. Same way that you can give mic privileges, we could all say that. Something to keep in mind, the reason why I'm spending so much time as you guys, I'm talking to as we're doing it, but I would typically be quiet, is you actually need to give like a minute or so for the students to do that, because some of our teachers on here who's taking this webinar did not answer as quickly as others. There's think time, there's broadband time that you need to account for each time you do an activity. So I waited a minute and then everyone was able to respond, because one of the things you can do in an online setting is you see those first 2 kids who got the answer right, and then all the rest of them are who either didn't quite hear you or still processing what they thought. That gives everyone that equity piece too when they're in the session. Any questions on warm up, classroom expectations, or anything like that? I can always go back to anything. So if you're thinking about it and you're not quite sure and you want to go back, we can. I'd like everyone to take a deep breath in and out. My students know we're on to the next activity. When you guys are in a good habit, the students can tell you what the next activity is because you're always in the same pattern. So we're going to be in math. My math corner always looks like this. It says math corner. It has a math icon in the upper right-hand corner. I gave you ideas or examples of how you could do that. I did that all in one slide. You wouldn't necessarily do that. Keep the slides simple so they're focused on the task at hand. Just like I don't keep my video on the whole time, just like I don't have the students' videos on the whole time, because we want to stay focused. Kindergarten, first, second grader who doesn't have the skill sets of typing, you could put this pink shape, this blue shape, this orange shape on 3 separate slides that says math corner, and you could have everyone turn on their mic and tell you what the shape is. For our older kids who are, you know, constantly needing reteaching, reminding, and reviewing place value, write the number in standard form can be something that you have written for them. You give them 2 minutes and then they would type this information into. They can do it in private chat if you close out the chat. They could do that in room chat. You could use an extension piece if your students know how to do this, where they are using a platform like GoFormative or Class Dojo or whatever you're using. You don't have to use any of this. You could have them just say it out loud like we did with MathWord. They could just type it in the chat. You could be beyond 1 or 2 of these. You could be just front loading with the work that they're going to be working on independently in their home beyond the scope of this assignment. The idea is present it in a simple way so the kids know what to focus. Questions on math, on how to present it or anything like that? 1 slide, 1 question. I gave you examples. That's why we're giving you math examples right here. So I would put the pink shape, the blue shape, and the orange shape and 3 separate slides for the same activity and have them go through each one. You need to give between 2 and 3 minutes time for any number sentence like you would with our 3 through 5 example. Or a linear equation or a, solving for area. Anything like that. They need 2 or 3 minutes because they need to be able to receive the information you're giving them, which could be a broadband delay. They need the process time, the scratch paper to work out the problem. And then you're timing it, and then you ask them to come back and you give them the action in which they're going to share their information. Are they typing in the chat? Are they saying it over the mic? Are they writing it in their on their Google Doc that you've pushed out to them? Whatever it is, however you've decided how they're going to respond, they're going to do that. And you're going to have them consistently respond in those similar ways. So they know, so then we're focused on learning and not how to communicate what they are doing. Any questions on this? So we're going to take a deep breath in and out, and we are going to transition to language art. So I call this ELA corner. I always have the same icon. It does not matter. The instruction, the content that I'm showing you here is something that I taught And I'm going to explain how I'm doing this, but it's always going to be the same. You're always going to see ALL corner, and you're always going to see that icon there. That way the kids know what we're transitioning into. You have to show them those transitions, because when you're in the classroom, how you transition them is passing out new papers, having them put something away, get another book out. And in a digital platform, you're giving them visual. You're telling them, we're giving a visual action. I always do breathing. It's super helpful. I do a lot of mindfulness with my students, but it's just helpful. Take a deep breath in and out. Now we're on to the next thing, and they can do that easily. One of my favorite things that have come out of this pandemic for education is StorylineOnline.net. I did this with my 7th grade students this last week. Why I like it is because it is the way they read the book, done by professional celebrities, so actors and people that are good at reading the book, but also they're doing it in that reading rainbow format. So you're seeing the person, right, the recognizable celebrity, but then as that celebrity is reading, they're actually seeing the book in real time. So they can see the illustrations, they can see the words on the page and that kind of thing. So they're actually getting that engagement similarly as if they were doing that reading with. I have a visual of what the book was, As Fast as Woods Could Fly. That's a book that we read. I have the hyperlink. That link is not the link to Storyline. That link is to the very specific book I want them to read, I want them to do. Because if you give students this site, and we know not every parent, our global pandemic has the same availability to work with the students in the same way, you're going to have all those concerns of students getting grade inappropriate content, maybe subject inappropriate content, not because the content isn't bad, but you and I both know Brain Pop and Khan Academy, they have sciences and things that is very helpful. But if that's a high school resource, we don't need our 2nd grader viewing it. It also helps manage stress. If I tell my students I want them to listen to, I gave them an extension activity, right? An independent activity on top of this. So I showed the clip in class, shared my screen, they got to watch it all. We went over comprehension questions, which you can see here on the board. I walked them through it. I gave them an extension activity. On that extension activity, they had access to just this link. I want you to read As Fast as Words Can Fly. I'm just giving you the link of As Fast as Words Can Fly. I am not giving you the link to then go down a rabbit hole to try to find where that is. It allows for students to stay focused. It decreases stress, and they get access to the things they need in creative ways. So for myself, I gave them these comprehension questions when I front loaded the activity. What does a vocabulary word upstander mean? What is the takeaway of the story? So they knew going into it what they were looking for. 13-minute video. Throughout the video, there was times, which I like, just like when you've seen in the 80s of the Reading Rainbow, where they stop and ask about something. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. I can press stop and I can ask the kids, what do you think? I think it's going so far. How does this character feel? What's going on? All those check-ins you do with your reading, if you were sitting at circle time, or if you were going through a guided novel or something else, and giving them creative platforms to see that that happens everywhere, right? Here's this random celebrity who's also modeling it and connecting those to real things. And you can build in those like I have vocabulary, I have comprehension, I have, right, social emotional learning with the takeaway, because this book happens to be about race relations during the 60s and how people treat one another and all these pieces. But it's very simple. Everyone knows what they're expected to do. This slide doesn't change. There's not a lot of stuff happening, and I'm checking for understanding. So what I would do in those comprehension classes, we would answer them one at a time. We just answer them one at a time. Once I'm satisfied with those answers, we'll move on. All of my students, when I do this, listen to it in real time. But I also give it for our students who either can't access it, need to hear it again. So I'm doing both. They are seeing it on the screen. We are going through it together. They are also getting it so they can listen to it again if they need to. This book's a picture book, so it's one entity. Most of them are. I mean, they have everything, right? They have a little red hen. They have preschool stuff. So like right now, my 4-year-old is listening to one right now as I am on this webinar. It's different. It's a beautiful site. So you can check out things that are high engagement. and there's tons, and they're constantly adding them. So I hope that helps answer questions on these. I like it because it's something they can do as a 1 or 2 day lesson, right? Because they have, like, if you're a kindergarten teacher, they have kindergarten length books, and you could do it as one lesson for your language arts today. Does that help? Beautiful. Okay, so I have 7th graders. You can still do this with kindergarten, but I want you to be front loaded. Why? Given this extension. So we did this. We went through the vocabulary word up standard. They're used to me asking this question. I phrase it just that way. They've been taught this all along the way, and you have those same mechanisms. You can translate that in here. They know how to ask that question. So these questions only took my students about 7 minutes to do, and then I gave them an extension. Question has been, since our closure, has been my overarching question that I want them to ponder and answer. So I don't want an answer right this second. I want an answer that I keep asking. I want them to develop an answer. They have to be a question like this that we're reminding of. What does the phrase mean, words or things? We heard about the story, jot down a few notes. You could send that out as a Google document, right? So each kid has their own Google document that they're working on, that they're building notes on as they're going through the literature over the days and weeks that we're doing this. Can answer it one time because you have students whose parents are first responders who are at daycare or other family member or all of those other things. That way you can still see what they're doing. And by giving these kind of open-ended things, you can bring in that larger unit feel or those overarching themes without everything needing to constantly be tethered to you have to read all 5 stories or you have to read these 2 articles and something like that. But you notice nothing but the one question is on the slide. I don't have little artwork. I don't have anything because I just want them to be focused on. And this looks similar to the document that they're looking at. So then everything stays consistent. Any questions on this? If you were lower grades, you could have them draw a picture. You could have them listen to the story again and do a feelings activity where they just draw with the color about how they feel as they're hearing the story. Those kinds of connections to text are really beneficial and very easy and manageable for your families to be doing in this time. So those are pieces. You don't have to do that. This slide, you don't have to do it all. You could have made this slide, or you did, or a history corner or something else. Whatever you want to do, I'm just showing you so many different ways you can provide and present. Hold on, I went too fast. I apologize. Okay, so we're going to take a deep breath in, and we are transitioning. My students are 7th grade students. They're in a block schedule for 90 minutes with me. I just showed you essentially what would have taken my students an hour. And what they're doing next is my students, because I know my students, you guys are making phone calls too, right? You know which families are struggling more. You know which families are having difficulties. You know which families are in the same boat as we are with our kids at home and spouses and things. I found it really important to do something fun with my 7th graders now. We do adventure time. Adventure time, this time, was a Scratch. Scratch is a free coding website. It's super easy for kids to do. My 4-year-old can do it with a little support. He's not a reader yet because he's 4, right? But they can very easy elementary school age create coding. If they do a quick login, it's safe, it's free, and they can make the little Scratch cat move. They can have a penguin walk down the way. If you have a student who's just with you and doesn't have that, you push this link out into the room chat and I have you all do it. That they can do it without it. It just won't save their image. Does this make sense? So it's low tech. I've had students where we've done days where I say, okay, everyone, here's a word search. Let's see how long it takes you to do it. And they all work together and they have the mic going and they're all chatting and typing and whatever. I've had kids where we've done guided art. So today, my students during adventure time, we used Art Hub and they all made a foldable shark that bites. And so we had to be creative. My students are doing this online, right? Because I'm giving them links and I'm going through their online work. I put them in breakout rooms. They're sharing their screen. I have 7th graders. They know how to do that. But they're doing that drawing in real time. You can display, because it's a video, on how to do it. You could have the steps on how to draw something. My own children did the shark with the bite and all those pieces. You could make this where you listen to silly songs and you did a freeze dance virtual party. There's so many different fun things that you do You can get on the video, stop sharing your screen, any place Simon says. This is just to remind them that we're all in this together. You can have fun when you're learning. They have fun with you in the classroom when you're learning. And that it really helps connect that school isn't just, now my teacher just pushes out all these assignments that they have to try to fit in while whatever is happening in their house is happening in their house. I find this really important. But I put a talk on it. So I give them about 20 minutes and then I bring them back and I transition them into their independent workspace, but I make that clear distinction and they can see the timer or they can hear the timer. Any questions on my adventure time or activity? If you are ready to transition, give me a Y. Awesome. Okay. So this slide stays up until the end. So I'm going to for my 7th grade students, they know how to go into breakout rooms and work independently, and I walk through that. Your students might not be prepared for that. You might be doing it where you have a slide of that adventure time of them learning how to draw the face of a giraffe, right? Where you know from the art books that they show. You're going to make sure everyone's here. They've said yes. You've given them some command that they can hear you. You take a deep breath in, out, and you say, okay, boys and girls, we are ready to transition. Let's talk about what's getting done till we meet again, right? Some of you guys are meeting I meet every day. Some of you might not be meeting every day. You might be meeting 3 times a week. Whatever it is, that's the transition you're going to say. And then you're going to be writing down the takeaways. I'm giving you a modified version of what this is. So we have TK, kinder, first, second, third, who don't have devices, right? We might be doing Zoom from their mom's phone or a tablet or what have you, or siblings' computer just to be live. But you might have made packets for them. You can give them on your slide the clear instructions of what lessons you want them to do. As simple as if you're meeting 3 days a week and you want them to do a page, you say, I would like you to get 1 page done in math and 2 pages done in math and 2 pages done in language arts till we meet again. If you are utilizing platforms like Google Classroom, then you might want to give more specific instructions. So I give them a list. They had an online assessment, which they had, and I would go through the list, working on assignments in the adventure instruction folder on the class website. My students, my 7th graders, were given this as a scavenger hunt, so they're scrambled. So if you looked at that site, and I'll show it to you in a moment, if you wanted to see the site, it's not in order. It's not on the 23rd, we did this. It is scrambled, and in each note, I wrote the date I assigned it because my 7th graders asked for it to be an adventure. And so that's how they decided it. That's not going to work for you guys because my students are accustomed to be teaching virtually. You want to be clear. So whatever you're asking them to do, you want to be clear. My daughter's teacher is currently, and lots of other teachers I know around the world are doing this. They're making a Google Doc. They're making it 4 or 5 pages. So the first sheet is the checklist. Here are all the assignments you need to get done this week. Here are the 2 optional pieces, right? Maybe you don't need them to do Persian diagram or diorama because now that they can't, there's not craft stores open, that's not a possibility. So you make that optional because you were going to assign it anyways and it doesn't hurt anything. You're going to make that list. You're going to give them what they need to do in math and their specific instructions, ELA, and so forth and so on. That link, if you're doing a Google document, or that checklist sheet could be your takeaway slide. And so then you ask them, okay, does everyone understand what's expected of you? Everyone's going to give me the letter T, and then they do that, and then you can release them. What I do, even though my students are, like I said, I teach virtually, my students are accustomed to the way that I ask them to do things, but we're in precarious times, my friends. We're in crisis mode. We're in a global pandemic. Business as usual is not business as usual. So what I do is this. We go through the takeaways, we give them the instructions, and then I give them an email each day with the recording of the session that I fulfilled. Like I said, I'm working on a platform where I can get those recordings much faster in Zoom. The reason why things are delayed is because everyone's using it, so it can be a little bit delayed. But you can also give them an email follow-up of just what the takeaways are. You're reinforcing what you just said. Just like when you went over the homework or you're having them take something home, that instruction's there on the packet for our little ones and on the board and on sheets for our bigger ones. Any questions on takeaways? Let's show you what that looks like. Are you ready? So we're pivoting a little bit. I'm still sharing. Can you guys see this? Can you see this? If you can see this, give me the letter T. You can see my art gallery where they made their chump. Okay. So I told you we're in precarious times. This is a Padlet, and my students have a link to this, and then they upload. So this is some of the artwork my students have that way, and you can tell because of FERPA violations, we don't have them write their names because this is a shared space, as you can tell, because my students did not do that. My website that they have, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is an easy peasy like website. No, I use this all year long, but I made this adventure instruction and then I gave them all their assignments, and you can see how I assign it that way. So that's what I meant, right? Art Kid tutorials, I had them do a bio poem, we were doing mindfulness, that kind of thing. They know to go here. And when I'm prompting them, like in their math lesson, where do you go to find this? They'll tell you. Go to the adventure instruction folder, right? Is it not showing? Okay, let me stop sharing and let me reshare. That happens sometimes, friends. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so let me go back. This is my Google website for my classroom. This is what we use all year long. Right? You can see down the side. I just call it a digital filing cabinet because that's really what it is. My kids access a lot of their content on a separate site, which has digital content for them, but this is my extension. These are my extra supports. So during our closure, I made this. So this is my adventure instruction. Remember, I have 7th graders and we're doing a scavenger hunt. So filing cabinets under Google Classroom platform has it where you have to, everything's done in alphabetical order. And my students wanted it that way rather than making separate folders. So I just uploaded what I assigned them each day. And they have this available. So they're getting the instruction of this is your ELA assignment for this day. This is your ELA assignment for today. And I modeled that in class. Does anyone have any questions about? I did want to show you my art gallery. This is the art gallery. I made it off Padlet. My students can upload. I have it set to where I have to approve it prior to them uploading it. One of the things you need to be careful when you display kids' work, just like when you display pictures of your students and things like that in the classroom, and you have to be careful of FERPA violations. And so we don't want kids writing their first and last name. As you can tell, my students didn't do that. That's why you don't have any names on there. And so this is what I'm doing to have them share their items, communicate with one another, be fun in this unusual time. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, turn off my mic for a second, and I want you to just think. I want you to think if you have any questions on anything. This is a great time to ask. If there's anything you're curious about, anything about distance learning, pacing and time and anything like that I can answer, but I'm gonna turn off my mic and let you. Sure, okay. So that's a great question. So the question is, what advice do you have for special education learners in distance learning? My biggest suggestion is number one, grouping your students based on their specific needs. So if you look at those, especially their IEP goals, right? If they're reading, make that time meaningful for them. Lots of front loading. So if you know students are going to be coming online, be very clear about what that expectation is ahead of time, right? Talking to the parents, whether it's like a quick tips, like when Johnny comes to class and we're going to do math and we're going to work on writing and we're going to work on reading, right? And we're going to do it in that order. And the ways I want him to answer are going to be these 3 ways. that helps with families to support that student. It gives the student what their expectation is. And then you know the teaching part. The teaching part is what you've been doing. You know exactly what groups need what types of instruction to support their best learning and growth, right? Because we're bridging gaps. That's the biggest piece, and less is more. In a digital platform, our students cannot do more than a typical peer can't do more than 3 questions in a 45-minute session. So if you're in block schedule, you should be doing 2. And for a kid with specialized needs, I would stick with that 2. You're going to give them very broken down pieces. The beauty of it is that in a distance learning setting, you actually can break them up into slides. I've been in classrooms and I've been with my students who have had meltdowns over the page their teacher gave them that has 23 math problems and they're losing it. And then you and I do our best practice, right? We start covering things up, we fold it up, right? You get to do that in these platforms. You can split up a worksheet. If you want your student to do a reading assignment and you break it up in 2 days, you can break it into 2 days. You only want them to work on this first step. Make each step each part of the slide, right? Step 1 is on one slide. That's all he sees. She sees, they see. You can chunk all those pieces out. Less is more. They can't do a ton because we're in a global pandemic, and it does not matter what learning needs your students have, because a lot of that is impacted by the environment around them. And being consistent, being concise, not having a ton of pomp and circumstance really helps them, and getting those routines really helps them get back on track. Yeah, and I'm doing a webinar on specialized populations tomorrow too. So if you're interested in seeing more about that, that's there for you. Any other questions, concerns, something that's off the wall that you just wanted to ask and maybe I know? All right, well, if you have nothing else, we can stop this webinar. I will stay in a few minutes to answer questions if you would like, but thank you guys so much for coming.
Anne, this is Lisa. Thank you for sharing. Yes. That was a great presentation. And hopefully you all got something out of it. And do you have a list of some of those websites that you use with your students? I heard you say Art Hub and what was the other one?
I can make a list. Yeah, and I can make a list and send it to Karen so she can add it to that DocuCenter that they're going to have up too, if that helps. Yeah, that's easy. I can copy and paste.
Use some of those with my own son. So
yes, I'm happy to do that. Absolutely.
Okay, folks. So thank you for joining us. And any last call for questions? Again, at the top of the chat, if you scroll up, I'll type it again. The website where you can access this recording and the materials as well, and also information on other webinars that we'll be holding. Have a good night, y'all, and stay safe.